Welcome to another video lesson in general mathematics. For today, we're going to have one-to-one function and inverse function. Our objectives are the following. Represent real-life situations using one-to-one functions, determine the inverse of a one-to-one function, and represent an inverse function through its table of values or graphs. At the end of the discussion, you should be able to answer the following questions. When do we say that a function is one-to-one, and how do we find the inverse of a one-to-one function? Let us recall that we define a function as a mapping from its domain to its range so that each element x of the domain is mapped to one and only one element of the range, meaning your domain x cannot be paired to two different y's. Consequently, a function is one-to-one if each element of the range is mapped from one and only one element x of the domain. Let's have an example. This mapping diagram is a function and illustrates a one-to-one function. This one is still a function, although you have here one y paired to two different x. But we know that for it to be a function, dapat yung x ang hindi pwedeng ipares sa dalawang magkaibang y. So this one is still a function, but it is not a one-to-one function. While this one is not a function, since you have here domain, which is x, nakapares sa dalawang magkaibang y, so definitely this is not a function, and it is also not a one-to-one function. Okay. This time, let's have this example. The relation pairing an airport to its airport code. For example, you have here Los Angeles International Airport. The airport code is LAX, L-A-X. While Ninoy Aquino International Airport, the code is MNL. So you will notice that each airport has its corresponding airport code. So therefore, this is a one-to-one function. Let's have another example, the relation pairing an SSS member to his or her SSS number. So you know that for every person there is a corresponding SSS number, just like your LRN number or learner's reference number, each student has its own. So this one is a one-to-one function. And then we have the relation pairing a real number to its square. This one is not a one-to-one function. Why not? For example, you have the number -2. The square of that is equal to +4. And if you also have +2 and you square it, you also have the same number, which is 4. So this one is not one-to-one. Okay, remember a vertical line test. It is a test to determine whether the given relation is a function or not, while a horizontal line test is a test to determine whether the function is one-to-one or not. So same with the vertical line, it should only intersect the graph at one point, not in more than one point. Okay, let's have this example. The graph is a graph of a decreasing exponential function, the curve 1, using the horizontal line test. When we draw a horizontal line and imagine it moving along the graph, it will only intersect the graph at exactly one point. So therefore, this is a one-to-one function. Let's have another one. Here you will notice that there is a horizontal line. At first, this horizontal line will intersect at one point, but if you go along and touch that part of the graph, it will touch at infinite number of points. So therefore, this is not a one-to-one function. And then lastly, if we have this a graph of a polynomial, at most, again, reaching this part of the graph, it will intersect the graph at most at 3 points. So again, this is not a one-to-one function. This time, the given is an equation. For example, you have f of x is equal to x cubed, y is equal to 3x plus 5. This is a cubic function and this is a linear function. Okay, all odd functions are one-to-one. Now, if we have this one, f of x is equal to the absolute value of x, we know that this one is a piecewise function. Okay, and this one you have y is equal to x squared, and y is equal to 1 over x squared. So this one is a function, but not one-to-one. Okay. Now that you know how to identify a one-to-one function, let's move on now to the inverse function of a one-to-one function. Okay, how do we determine the inverse of a function? If f is one-to-one function, then the inverse of f, denoted by f of -1, this is the symbol for inverse function, is the function formed by reversing all the ordered pairs in f. Therefore, you have here the inverse function will be equal to y and x for the function xy which is in f. Now, if f or the function is not one-to-one, there is no inverse function, or the inverse function does not exist. There are three properties of inverse function. One, if the inverse function exists, okay, the inverse function is also one-to-one. And the domain of the inverse function will be the range of the function, while the range of the inverse function will become the domain of the function. Okay, you will understand this as we go along with examples. Okay, to illustrate it, for example, you have the domain and the range of the function. If we're going to interchange the position, their position, or the elements, the position of the elements, if we're going to interchange it, you will get the inverse function. And therefore, the domain of the function will become the range of the inverse function, and the range of the function will become the domain of the inverse function. Let's have this example. Let's have set B is the set of this ordered pair. You will notice that this one is a function because no x coordinate is being repeated, and it is also a one-to-one function. If we're going to get the domain of this, the domain are simply the x coordinates. So you will have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And your range is the y coordinate, or the set of all y coordinates. So you will have 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, if we're going to get the inverse function of set B, you will write it this way. So you read this one as the inverse function of B, and all you have to do is to interchange the ordered pairs. So 0, 4 will be 4, 0, 1, 5 is 5, 1, 2, 6 is 6, 2, 3, 7 will be 7, 3, and 4, 8 will become 8, 4. So this will be the inverse function of set B. Now, your domain now here will be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and your range will become 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we can say that the domain of the inverse function is the range of the function, and the range of the inverse function is the domain of the function. So that is how you get the inverse function. Okay, let's have this example, the social security number. So again, this one is a one-to-one function. And if we're going to get the inverse function of this, all you have to do is to interchange. And this will be the resulting function. So S stands for the social security number. So we will have now here S of -1, or this is the inverse of the social security number. So instead of writing the names, you will write first the social security number and then the name. So you just interchange the domain and range. This is how you represent it. Now, how can we find the inverse of a function if the equation is given? These are the steps that we're going to follow. First, you have to determine if the function is one-to-one. If f is one-to-one, then the inverse exists. 2. In the equation f of x, you will replace f of x by y, since you know that f of x is also equal to y. The third step is to interchange x and y. X will become y and y will become x. 4. You have to solve for the new y in terms of x. And lastly, you're going to replace y with the symbol of the inverse function f of negative 1. So again, you read this one as the inverse function in the new equation. Okay, let's have example number 1. Find the inverse of f of x is equal to 3x squared plus 2. So step 1 is to determine whether it is a function or not. Since your f of x here is degree 1, so therefore this is a function. So step 2, you have to replace f of x by y. So this will become y is equal to 3x squared plus 2. Next step is to interchange x and okay, so here in this equation, this will become x and this will become y. So you will have x is equal to 3y squared plus 2. Fourth step is to solve for the new y in terms of x. So from this point, we're going to solve for y. So we transpose positive 2 to the other side, so that will give you 3y squared is equal to x minus 2. And then solving for y, we divide both sides by 3, so that will give you y squared is equal to x minus 2 divided by 3. Y squared, so that it will become y to the first power, you have to extract the root of both sides. So that will give you now y is equal to the square root of x minus 2 over 3. I hope you did follow. And then last step is to replace y with the inverse function in the new equation. So therefore, your final answer will be this one. So the inverse function of f of x is equal to 3x squared plus 2 will be the square root of x minus 2 divided by 3. I hope you did get this, the step-by-step procedure. Okay, let's have example number 2. Find the inverse of y is equal to the square root of x squared minus 1. So step 1, if it is determine if it is 1 to 1, and then step 2, you replace f of x by y. Since this is already y, so we proceed with step 3. So we have to interchange x and y. So this will become x and this will become y. So you will have x is equal to the square root of y squared minus 1. Step 4 is to solve for the new y in terms of x. So here, you're going to solve for the new y. So the first step is to remove the square root. You have to square both sides. Okay? So this will be the resulting equation. X squared is equal to y squared minus 1. So lalabas lang siya dun sa radical when you square both sides of the equation. Next, to solve for this, we transpose negative 1. So that will be y squared is equal to x squared plus 1. And then again, for this to be to the first degree, you extract the root again. So that will give you now y is equal to the square root of x squared plus 1. So this will be now your inverse function, but you have to do step number 5, which is to replace this y by the symbol of the inverse function. So you will have now the inverse function of x will be the square root of x squared plus 1. So that this is the inverse of this one. Okay, let's have the last example. Find the inverse of y is equal to 3x plus 2 divided by x minus 4. Okay, step number 1, determine whether it is 1 to 1. You know that this is a rational function. Okay, and then step number 2, replace f of x by y. Since this is already in terms of y, so we will now proceed to step number 3. So step number 3 is to interchange x and y. So this y will become x and these two x's here will become y. So you will have the resulting equation, x is equal to 3y plus 2 divided by y minus 4. Step number 4 is to solve for the new y in terms of x. So here we're going to solve for y. So to solve this, we will do cross multiplication. So you will have x times the quantity y minus 4 is equal to 3y plus 2. And then you multiply this x here using the distributive property. And that will give you the resulting equation xy or x times y minus 4x is equal to 3y plus 2. And then we transpose 3y and negative 4. So you will have here xy minus 3y is equal to 4x plus 2. So all those terms with y should be on the same side so that we can solve for y. And then here, you will notice that y is a common factor. So we're going to factor out y. So you'll have y times the quantity x minus 3 is equal to 4x plus 2. And finally, para maging y na lang siya, we need to divide both sides by x minus 3. And that will give you now y is equal to 4x plus 2 divided by x minus 3. Okay, so and to do step number 5, you just simply replace this y by the inverse function. So that will give you now f of the inverse function of x will be 4x plus 2 over x minus 3. So this will be your final answer. The inverse function of y is equal to 3x plus 2 over x minus 4 is 4x plus 2 over x minus 3. So just follow the step, okay? The steps, the 5 steps. Okay, sometimes you will skip step 1 and 2 and you can proceed with step 3 until step number 5. Okay? To summarize our discussion, for a function y is equal to f of x, the inverse relation of f is a function if and only if f is 1 to 1. And second, if and only if the graph of the function f passes the horizontal line test. Number 2, if f is 1 to 1, the inverse relation of f is a function which is called the inverse function of f, which could be written in this symbol. Y is equal to f of negative 1 of x. Okay, that ends our discussion for today. Again, visit your Google Classroom for your output. And then kindly subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thank you. And God bless you all.